I used to hear people say that if you are good enough at your job, no one can overlook you. It sounds inspiring, motivational even, but I learned the opposite. At Nexora Systems, I could run the entire company like a freshly tuned engine, and they still treated me like a shadow in the hallway. I am Elena Monroe. 3 years ago, I did not join Nexora for a promotion or because someone finally recognized my worth. I joined because I married the only son of Franklin Hale, the chief executive officer of the company. From the outside, that sounds like an advantage. But in Franklin's world, being a Hale daughter in law was not leverage. It was a reminder to know my place, which meant no ambition, no stepping out of line, and definitely never outshining anyone. I started with no title, no job description, no nameplate. I did not even have my own desk. New hires asked if I was seasonal contract staff. One middle manager once asked me to deliver documents to the department I was literally running. They had no idea what I did. They only knew I was Elena, Evan's wife. Evan, my husband, is sweet and soft-spoken and allergic to conflict. He worked on the product side, buried in data models, blissfully unaware of who was clawing for power and who was losing it. If you asked him who kept operations alive, he would probably point to some automated workflow rather than me, the person who built and maintained it. I do not blame him. He is not malicious. He is just the kind of man who can stand in the center of a storm and somehow never notice the wind. In my first year, they gave me operations support, which meant doing every task no one else wanted. Nexora's order tracking system back then was a puzzle held together with duct tape, 3 Excel sheets, 4 people updating them, each with their own naming conventions. I spent 2 months reorganizing everything. I did not transform the company, I just kept it from drowning in its own chaos. But I still remember the day I finished the new delay prediction model, a tool that cut processing time by 70%. I sent the demo to the whole team, proud for once. The only feedback I got was an email from Franklin. Reviewed. That was it. No exclamation point, no acknowledgement, just one clipped word. But I kept going, believing that someday the results would speak loud enough for me. In my second year, they shifted me to work directly with suppliers. Not a promotion, more like they were short-staffed, and I was the quietest person in the room. So I learned every contract, studied every clause, found errors in old agreements, errors that could have cost Nexora tens of thousands. I renegotiated warehouse fees, returned policies, and earned praise from partners who said I was the first person at Nexora who could actually speak supply chain. I forwarded that compliment to Franklin. He did not respond. But a month later, he appeared in an industry interview saying his vision had strengthened Nexora's supplier relationships. I read that quote while eating a cold sandwich. I laughed, a tired, hollow laugh. By the third year, I was overseeing 5 teams, managing over 60 contracts, handling so many projects that some days I could not remember what day it was. But still no title, no nameplate, no annual review, no bonus. I worked like a machine powered by caffeine and a brand of patience I did not know a human could possess. In my most fractured moments, I still told myself that if I worked just a little harder, they would have to acknowledge me. But the truth became unavoidable. This was not about competence. It was about the fact that they never intended to recognize someone like me in the first place. Until that afternoon, I walked past the main conference room just as Franklin was holding court with the leadership team. He always spoke like the whole world was recording him. Innovation, he said in that low, performative tone, always comes from the young. I had heard that line at my own wedding, at the company anniversary, at quarterly reviews, and now again. I did not turn my head, but I knew what that sentence foreshadowed. Favoritism has a scent. You learn to recognize it. When I stepped into the room, everyone was already seated. Franklin stood in the center with his hand on the shoulder of a young man, bright-eyed, polished, hair gelled to perfection. He was smiling as he had just won a scholarship, though the only thing he had won was access. Wait until everyone is here, Franklin said, patting his shoulder. I want to introduce a rising talent. This is Travis Reddick, my best friend's son. He will be interning with the strategy team, a truly promising mind. Travis nodded, grinning so wide I felt tempted to hand him a napkin to wipe the shine off his teeth. I glanced at his setup, two brand new monitors, a window desk overlooking the skyline, a freshly printed nameplate. It took me 3 years not to get a nameplate. Franklin kept talking about new perspectives, youthful energy, and the next generation. People clapped. A few glanced my way with that quiet, uneasy sympathy. Not pity, just the honest discomfort of people who understood exactly what was happening and chose silence because silence was safer. I sat there, saying nothing. Not jealous, not angry, just watching an old future repeat itself like a movie you never want to see again, yet somehow it keeps playing. I had built the company's machine, and today they handed the keys to an intern. If you are still here with me, let me ask you something. Where are you watching from? I want to know who is on the other side of this story, because I am certain someone out there has lived this exact script, doing everything, getting almost nothing, and being replaced by someone who simply showed up with the right last name or the right connections. If that is you, leave a comment. I want to see you, the way my old company never saw me. Closing a major deal should at least earn you a moment where someone remembers your name, especially when it is the kind of deal the chief executive officer once called out of reach. But at Nexora Systems, I learned that some things you do well will still be treated as if they happened on their own. This client was not easy. They were a tech retail chain in Denver, famous for shifting deadlines and painfully strict communication. At first, Franklin, our chief executive officer, scheduled the meetings himself. But less than 10 minutes in, he quietly handed everything to me, saying they needed someone more flexible, which, stripped of its politeness, meant you handle it. I want no part in this, so I handled it. 7 straight weeks of every absurd call imaginable, from 10 at night on a Sunday to 6 in the morning on a Tuesday. They changed their requirements 3 times, adjusted their KPIs 4 times, and asked me to rewrite the entire delivery schedule to make it more visual. I did not complain. Chaos was something I had always known how to tame. And not only did I get them what they wanted, but I also got them to sign an expansion clause for the next quarter. The deal was worth nearly $500,000. On Monday morning, I walked into the office and saw a large gift basket on the reception desk, wrapped in blue ribbon and glossy cellophane. A small card was tucked on the side. Elena Monroe, thank you for your professionalism and unbelievable patience. We look forward to working with you again. I froze, like my brain needed extra time to process the unfamiliar sensation of being recognized. I had not even touched the basket when Franklin stepped out of a conference room, paused, and glanced at it. Oh, from Denver, right. Before I could answer, he picked it up as if it had always belonged to him. I will bring this into the leadership room. Let everyone enjoy it. I stiffened, not because of the gift, but because of how effortlessly he walked off with it, as if I had never been standing there. When I entered the room 10 minutes later, the chocolate boxes were already opened. The most expensive one had its seal torn, the best pieces gone. Franklin was chewing as he spoke. Your client sure knows how to pick gifts. No one mentioned the card. No one mentioned me. That afternoon, Franklin sent out a 600-word internal announcement celebrating the successful deal. The email praised strategic vision, teamwork, and effective leadership. I scrolled down, waiting to see a familiar name. There was nothing. The person who untangled every knot in that contract had vanished again, another ghost at a celebration I had built from the ground up. However, what truly chilled me was something else entirely. Travis, the intern Franklin brought in barely a week ago, had been moved to a new desk, leather chair, large desk, 2 brand new monitors, a seat right by the window overlooking Central Park. I even heard a few gasps from the finance team. Wow. Sitting. Here must double your productivity. I was still in the same corner, next to a fake plant and a fan that rattled. Still using the laptop I had bought with my own money because the information technology department said there was no budget to upgrade equipment for operations. I did not resent Travis. He was just a pawn. But the contrast was impossible to ignore. I had been here for 3 years, running almost the entire supply chain. Travis had just learned everyone's names this week. Later that afternoon, as I was printing documents, a vice president walked past my desk and asked, "Whose assistant are you?" I looked at him for a few seconds and replied softly, I handle logistics and senior partner operations. His face flushed. He nodded awkwardly and hurried away. I was not bothered. Misidentification had become routine. That night, I began saving things I had never thought I would need. I created a new folder on my personal laptop and named it Receipts, meaning evidence. I stored every email I sent, every contract I drafted, every amended clause. Every internal note could later be twisted into something else, not to retaliate, but to remind myself that I existed, that I was the one who built these things. Working in silence long enough makes you doubt your own existence. You start thinking maybe you imagined everything, maybe you have not done anything meaningful. But those files, those messages, those clauses with my fingerprints on them, they were proof. Proof that I was here. Proof that I did not back down. From my corner desk, I glanced at Travis. He was asking someone how to open a data sheet, eyes fixed on two giant monitors, looking like he was operating the National Space Agency. The afternoon sun hit the collar of his shirt, still perfectly creased, the sign of someone who had never washed an office shirt himself. I turned back to my screen, saved another contract into the receipts folder, and named it North Flow Quarter 4 Clauses Final by EM. I would remember that name, and maybe, sooner than anyone expected, it would be the first link that pulled the entire system into the light. They did not see me, but I saw everything. They renamed my idea, slapped Comic Sans across the title, and called it innovation. I called it selective theft, sugar-coated with conferences and slide decks. That Wednesday, Franklin scheduled an internal meeting with department heads. The description on the calendar said sharing the strategic direction for the next quarter. I did not have a good feeling. When Franklin used the phrase strategic direction, it usually meant he had just met someone richer than him at a white wine lunch. The meeting took place in the Phoenix Room, the largest room on the ninth floor, used only for fireworks announcements, the kind he believed would make people clap for his vision. I arrived on time, early enough to sit where I could see everything, yet far enough not to be called on for a spontaneous speech. Franklin walked in wearing a perfectly pressed suit, smiling as if he had secured fresh funding. Behind him was Travis, the full-time intern who understood the job part-time. Franklin got straight to the point. He projected the first slide onto the screen with a massive title, Project Elevate, the future of logistics at Nexora. Blue background, Comic Sans font. I froze for a second, not because of the font, but because of the content. Every sentence, every bullet point, every workflow diagram mirrored 90% of the plan I had drafted during my lonely weekends, while the rest of the team had gone home early on Friday. No one knew I stayed behind, rewriting lines of code, testing every data flow, building a mock tracking system on Google Sheets for one of our key clients. I had named that idea Nexus Track. It was my big move, the one I planned to present at the end of the quarter when the metrics were ready and the prototype stable. I had not told a soul. It lived only in a private folder titled Backup in case life betrays you. Franklin did not wait. He did not need to understand the system. All he needed was the draft, a new name, and a few buzzwords like strategic and groundbreaking. Then hand everything to Travis. And leading Project Elevate, I am proud to introduce Travis, a young talent with a fresh perspective. Polite, awkward claps filled the room. I looked around. A few people clapped to avoid tension. Others glanced at me and immediately looked away. No one asked, Elena, do you have thoughts on this? I did not stand. I did not sigh. I simply nodded once and opened my laptop under the table. I sent an email to myself. Start date. Project Elevate. Phase 1. Observation. After the meeting, I went back to my desk, opened the Nexus Track folder, and began breaking the data into smaller pieces. I backed up everything: operational workflows, supplier maps, exclusive contract clauses, transition plans. Each file is saved with simple encryption, one copy on an external drive, one on a personal server. I was no longer the person whose name disappeared from emails. I was the person with the evidence. Travis walked by my desk at 4 in the afternoon. He tapped the edge of my table like we had been close colleagues for years. Hey, Elena, do you know who I should ask for supplier system access? I still cannot find the login for the dashboard. I looked at him, keeping a polite smile. You can try asking the information technology team. They need to verify your role before granting access. But I am the lead for Elevate, he said, half proud and half uncertain. All the more reason to verify. It is a big project. He nodded and stumbled away. That evening, I sat in the coffee shop below the building. Cold coffee. Opened the laptop. I reread the contract with Northbridge, our largest logistics partner. In clause 7.2, there was a line I had written myself. Official and sole point of contact. Elena Moreno. Any change of role requires written notice, confirmation from both parties, and a minimum transition period of 30 days. I remembered negotiating that clause. The attorney asked, "Are you sure? This is highly personalized." I just smiled. Sometimes you need your name in places that cannot be erased. I was not the type to grab a microphone in a crowded room and shout, "I am the real author." I did not have time to be the loud victim. I chose to be the quiet constant, and the irreplaceable one. A colleague walked past the cafe window and did not notice me. Through the glass, I saw faces that used to smile at me now, staying silent, because they knew what was happening and chose not to intervene. I did not blame them. Not anymore, because this time I was ready, and I had no intention of letting them erase me as easily as they had before. I watched the last lights of the day reflect across the cold stone table, took a sip of my stale coffee, and whispered to myself, "You can name the project whatever you want, but when it collapses, do not ask why the bolts knew how to pull themselves out." I do not need to shout to be heard. I only need to step back so they can see who has been running everything. The all-hands meeting took place on a Monday morning, thick with the sense that something was coming. The room had been prepared more carefully than usual. Chairs rearranged, catered pastries lined up neatly as if inviting everyone to forget the trap waiting beneath the sugar. I took my usual seat, not too close to the head of the table but not far enough to disappear. A safe vantage point, the kind I always chose, invisible but observant. The lights were brighter than usual. Franklin entered exactly as he always did, slow, chin lifted, carrying the air of a man about to bestow blessings. But today, he did not walk in alone. Travis walked beside him, white shirt stiff, expression tight, like he was trying to remember the name of the company. Franklin gave a wide smile. "Thank you all for being here. Today is a special day for Nexora. We are officially entering a new era with Project Elevate, a breakthrough initiative designed to expand our logistics capability for strategic partners." I narrowed my eyes. Breakthrough initiative. That was the plan I had written, tested, and refined for 6 months. The dashboard interface, the supply chain analytics system, and the priority model for customer tiers. Every piece was something I had designed. I had never named it formally, but I knew that system like the lines on my own palm. Franklin continued. And to give the project a truly fresh perspective, I am pleased to announce that Travis Anderson will lead Project Elevate as our strategic innovation lead. In that instant, the room lost its air. Some people glanced at me, others stared at their laptops as if the keys had suddenly become urgent. I smiled, 3 slow claps, the exact minimum standard of politeness. No one called my name, no thanks, not even a nod. I was not surprised. What I felt instead was clarity. After the meeting, I returned to my desk, opened the letter I had drafted over the weekend, printed it, folded it, and slipped it into a plain white envelope. I did not need theatrics. I only needed timing. I knocked on the chief executive officer's door. Franklin signaled me in while still talking on the phone, pretending to be busier than he was. I did not wait for him to finish. I stepped forward and placed the envelope on the walnut desk. He set the phone down, frowned. "Are you kidding?" I met his eyes. "No. I am simply clarifying my position. And yours." He opened the letter and read it. A single line. "I, Elena Matthews, resign from Nexora Systems, effective 2 weeks from today." Silence stretched across the room. Eventually, he leaned back, arms crossed, forcing a measured tone. "Elena, this does not have to be so serious. We are all adults here." I cut him off gently. Exactly. And adults do not erase each other's work to pave the way for their best friend's son. He said nothing. His eyes stayed fixed on the letter as if waiting for the ink to change its mind. I pulled out my phone. Before leaving his office, I opened an email I had drafted months earlier and hit send. Per clause 9.3. Liaison Departure Notification. In our vendor management system, there was a clause I had quietly inserted last year when renegotiating with our most critical supplier, Cardinex Logistics. Under that clause, only the designated representative named explicitly in the contract could handle requests, complaints, and operational coordination. That representative was me. Want to change it. They needed written approval from Cardinex and a transition notice of 30 days. I walked out of the office. No one looked at me, but I knew some people had been listening. I did not need applause. I left the board without knocking over a single piece. Just enough for them to realize that the person they treated like a supporting role had been the one holding the reins all along. A week after I shut down my laptop and walked out of Nexora with my bag, everything inside the company began to collapse. Not loudly, but slowly, quietly, just enough for panic to crawl up everyone's spine. Day one looked fine. Travis showed up earlier than usual, carrying a thick stack of printed documents, eyes lighting up as he admired his new desk. Others huddled in corners, whispering, gossiping about the young talent. I sat in a co-working space, opened my laptop, checked my emails, and drank my cold brew. I knew I had placed a big bet. Now it was time to see who would call the bluff. By day 3, the first red light flashed. Our primary vendor, Northbridge Logistics, sent a sharply worded email to the shared procurement inbox. Subject line: Urgent, unauthorized contact. The message said, "We cannot process orders without the liaison designated in the contract. The most recent requester is not Elena Monroe, so the request is denied. Please confirm the valid liaison before resubmitting." The email went to the entire procurement team and was copied to logistics, supply chain, and the chief financial officer. I clicked it open. I was not surprised. The day before, Travis had messaged the group chat saying he did not understand why the vendor dashboard kept showing error 403. And a flood of emails with the phrase "please advise" had begun circulating from purchasing, support teams, and even transportation staff. Externally, the company tried to soothe the situation. An internal announcement went out. Due to recent leadership transitions, Project Elevate is undergoing a restart process. All new orders are temporarily paused until the system stabilizes. But that announcement did not go to the suppliers. It went to customers. And one of those customers replied, copied the executive team, and said, "We cannot wait any longer. We are moving to another partner." By day 5, the logistics floor was filled with ringing phones, raised voices, frantic typing, and the kind of exhausted sighs you hear only in crisis. At first, it were minor complaints. Then it shifted into slow-burning anger. Customers calling, vendors refusing requests, the Midwest branch unable to deliver shipments, inventory piling up, missed orders. A full domino chain. A former colleague, someone I once helped rebuild KPIs for, messaged me privately. "Elena, we are done. Project Elevate under Travis has no idea what is happening. They have called us 5 times this morning just to ask, when is the shipment arriving?" I did not reply. I sat there watching the glow of my laptop, remembering every line of code, every Excel macro, every late night meeting. All of it time-stamped, documented with my name on it. So I did not panic. I knew most of their problems came from one missing element, a liaison. And that name, Elena Monroe, was now somewhere else. In the middle of the chaos, an internal memo was issued to all management. Temporarily suspend all logistics operations for Tier 1 customers until the vendor system, including tracking, approvals, and contracts, is fully reviewed. An older employee in the supply chain sighed. "Maybe we should hire Elena back." Someone else shook his head. "Are you kidding? She is gone." I took a sip of my coffee. Life can be like a startup pushing a bug straight to production. They laugh at pretty slides, catchy buzzwords, and the philosophy of innovation. Then, when the bug crashes the server, they finally understand that clean code still beats empty slogans. Turns out you cannot replace me with LinkedIn quotes and cologne. Later that evening, sitting in the quiet co working space, I received a call from an unknown number. I stayed silent and listened. A trembling voice, sounding a lot like my former procurement manager, said, "Elena, we are collapsing. They cannot restart the vendor system. Everything is locked. We only have you left." I ended the call. I knew they were afraid, not because they lost the chief executive officer's daughter-in-law, but because they lost the person who knew every corner of the machine. I did not want more trouble. The moment I handed in my resignation letter and walked out of the chief executive officer's office, I had placed my bet. That white envelope had been a silent explosion. No yelling, no accusations, just the right departure at the right time. I held my coffee cup, looked at the dark screen, and allowed myself a quiet, serious smile. I did not need them to know. I only needed them to understand. When the system fails, when vendors halt operations, when customers walk away, when the company thrashes like a fish on dry land, they will realize that the invisible one was the one holding everything together. The machine had stopped, and I stood outside the glass, watching the broken gears, the stalled trucks, the panicked employees, and I did not step back in. When an empire starts to burn, people do not call the firefighters first. They call the person who built it. And that afternoon, as the Austin sunlight shifted into a copper glow, my phone vibrated. Not an unknown number, not spam. It was Franklin. I stared at the screen for a few seconds, set down my cold brew, wiped my hands on my jeans, and answered. I did not need to guess why he was calling. This was not a wellness check. "Elena." Franklin's voice came through, trying to sound steady but rough, like someone who had spent the entire day shouting in a boardroom. "I hope you have a few minutes." "Depends on the content," I said. Not harsh, not soft, just neutral. The kind of voice no one at Nexora had ever heard from me, because I had always been the one who had to prove myself. He inhaled slowly, then began with the sentence every American chief executive officer uses when trying to convince someone to return to a battlefield. "We are all adults here, right? And it seems you may have heard already. Project Elevate is running into a few obstacles. A few." I raised an eyebrow even though he could not see it. "From what I have heard, vendors are refusing deliveries, customers are delaying orders, the system is locked, contact authorization is blocked, and internal teams are in chaos. I think that number goes beyond a few." He let out a bitter laugh, the kind a man gives when he realizes he bet on the wrong player in a very expensive game. "Elena, let me be direct. I need you. Just temporarily. Help us bring the system back on track. After that, everything can return to its place. You know Elevate better than anyone." I leaned back in my chair and looked out the cafe window. The street outside was busy, people walking by without knowing that a single phone call could decide the survival of a company. But I knew, and Franklin knew. "I am not coming back as an employee," I said. "Elena, do not be upset. I am not asking that. I just need your temporary support. In whatever capacity works, as long as you help me save the ship." "Independent consultant," I replied. "If Nexora wants me, that is the only capacity." Silence stretched. I could hear him breathing, then flipping papers as if searching for the right script. But no script meant anything when the building was already shaking. "All right," he said finally. "Send me your rate." I gave a quiet, cool smile. "Triple my previous salary." The line went so still that it was like the air froze. I continued. "And full decision authority over all Tier 1 supply chain vendors. Not partial approval. Full. All vendor communication goes through me or my consulting firm. If anyone else interferes, I stop immediately." I heard Franklin swallow, sharp and audible. Maybe he was calculating the cost. Maybe he was regretting letting me go. Maybe both. "Elena," he said quietly, "you have found your voice again." I leaned forward and spoke softly, letting the truth settle. "I always had a voice, Franklin. You just talked over it every time I tried to speak." It was not spite, not anger, just accuracy, finally delivered at the right moment. Franklin exhaled. "Then send me the proposal. I will send it within 2 hours," I said. Whether Nexora signs it is up to you. But a warning: if vendors submit withdrawal notices, then even if you offer me 5 times that amount, I will not be able to fix it. I ended the call first, not out of disrespect, but because the conversation had reached its end. I switched into work mode immediately, opened my laptop, downloaded the template contract from the consulting firm I had registered the week before, and edited it line by line. Scope of work, term of engagement, payment conditions, termination terms, exclusive vendor contact rights, upfront retainer, and finally, the rate sheet, non-negotiable. I reviewed it once more and sent it. Proposal for Nexora Systems, Elevate Recovery Consulting. About an hour later, an email appeared from the legal department. Short and urgent. Proposal received. The board will review immediately. The situation requires a same-day response. I smiled faintly. 2 weeks ago, they did not even respond to my emails. Today, they reviewed my contract within 1 hour. For the first time, it was clear. Their silence back then was not indifference, it was blindness. That evening, I left the cafe and walked toward my apartment. The air was colder, the wind carrying hints of smoke from nearby restaurants preparing dinner. I looked up at the Nexora sign glowing above the city. Tall, bright, immovable. Once, I wanted that name to look at me, just once, with the respect I deserved. But tonight, standing outside, head lifted, I realized I no longer needed it to see me. I had built my own place where my voice carried weight. As I stepped into the elevator of my building, my phone buzzed again. An email from Franklin, not from legal. One line. The board agrees. We will sign the contract in the morning. I looked at the message. Not joy, not revenge, just calm. Because in the end, what I wanted was never for them to pay a price. What I wanted was for my value to be placed exactly where it belonged. That morning, Lauren, Nexora's head of legal, called me very early. She said only one sentence. The board has requested an emergency meeting. You should know this. I could hear the exhaustion in her voice, the kind that does not come from lack of sleep, but from having to fix other people's mistakes. In 3 years at Nexora, I had never heard Lauren sound this shaken. While I sipped my coffee, the board meeting was already underway on the 22nd floor. I was not there, but every person in that room was talking about me, and none of them realized that the chaos flooding Nexora was the direct result of what they had ignored for 3 years. Lauren opened the meeting with a firm voice. We have completed the full audit of Elevate's intellectual property as requested by the Chief Executive Officer. Conclusion. Elena Rosario retains complete ownership of all core components of the logistics system. Franklin frowned, trying to look calm. Which components? Lauren projected the slide onto the screen. A long list appeared, each item with my name beside it. All internal operational documentation, the dashboard interface, source code for the demand forecasting tool, the API suite for vendor integration, contract templates, and data transfer protocols. Everything they believed had been built by a team. The truth was simpler. I wrote all of it. No one else in that room even understood the depth of what they were looking at. Lauren pointed at the first line. This is the distribution right to the documentation. Elena is the author, the signatory, and the rights holder. There is no transfer document on file before her resignation. The room went silent. A board member asked, "But the system is already running. How is it her property?" Lauren replied, "Because she produced all of it under an independent consulting framework, and Franklin authorized her to retain intellectual property rights unless the board issued an official revocation. No such document exists." Franklin's face drained of color. I could picture him flipping papers, searching for a clause to save himself, but there was no escape. He had never read the terms, and that clause was mine. Travis finally spoke, his voice trembling while trying to sound useful. Wait, there is no way all of that belongs to Elena. I am the project lead. Lauren cut him off without hesitation. Mr. Travis, you were announced as the lead 3 days after she resigned. The only files you ever edited were presentation slides where you changed the font to Comic Sans. Someone on the board actually laughed. Travis turned red, tried to argue, but no words came out. His eyes darted around the room, searching for support. No one offered any. Lauren continued. We checked the metadata of the entire dashboard. From the first draft to the final deployment, every version was edited by Elena. There is no recorded contribution from you. Travis froze, then dropped his gaze to the table. Franklin looked at him with disappointment, but he knew the blame was not only on the intern. He had placed the wrong person in the worst possible role. Lauren concluded. Nexora is currently operating a system it does not legally own. If the company continues to use it without Elena's explicit approval, Nexora could be sued for intellectual property violation. No one moved. Only the ventilation system hummed steadily, as if it were the only thing still functioning properly. At last, Mason, the oldest and quietest board member, whose words always carried weight, set his pen down and spoke in a low voice. Travis, could you step outside for a moment? No one looked at him as he stood. No one spoke. He packed his laptop quietly, bowed his head, and walked out. The door closed softly, a softness that felt cruel. Lauren turned to Franklin. At this point, the only viable option is to renegotiate with Elena. Every other path leads to severe legal risk. Franklin exhaled, exhausted, defeated, stripped of arrogance. He looked at the documents in front of him as if he had just discovered his own signature on the company's death warrant. He finally spoke, voice thin as breath. We will have to renegotiate with her. And when he said it, leaning back like a man who had lost something precious, the truth was this. What he lost was not the project, not the control. It was the illusion that he could rule a system whose true architect had never been given a seat at the table. In that moment, everyone in the room understood. They had been careless. They had been complacent. They had grown too comfortable dismissing the person who worked silently behind the scenes. They forgot to read the terms. And more importantly, they forgot who wrote them. I knew something was coming the moment I received an email from the address I had worked beside for 3 years. Not from Franklin, not from Travis, but from Nora, the customer care lead I once rescued from a burning contract by rebuilding an entire reporting system a full week ahead of deadline. The subject line was brief. Urgent. Hexport wants you back. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I had expected it. When a system collapses, people do not run to the person holding the wheel. They run to the person who built the engine. Hexport was one of our diamond tier clients, contributing nearly 20% of Nexora's quarterly revenue. And it was one of the accounts where I had personally handled the entire logistics pipeline, from delivery systems to KPI frameworks. Their team once gifted me a bottle of whiskey for Thanksgiving with a handwritten note. We are still standing because of you. Now they no longer wanted to stand inside a system that did not have me in it. The meeting with Hexport's leadership took place over Zoom, and it seemed that Raymond, or rather Franklin, had still not recovered from what happened in the boardroom days earlier. He stayed silent through their entire presentation, while I sat there as the appointed point of contact, or more accurately, the deciding factor. We will not continue with Nexora unless Elena is the one directly running operations, their representative stated in a tone that allowed no negotiation. I said nothing. I only nodded. In my mind, one thing was obvious. This was not a discussion, it was a verdict. Franklin blinked. Nora stared down at her desk. Travis was not present, likely busy trying to fix a KPI report he could not understand because I was the one who had created the scoring logic. Hexport continued. Elena now has her own company. We are prepared to move our entire contract to her firm if the transition terms are agreed upon by both sides. And just like that, everything shifted. Within a week, all of Hexport's data, communication chains, and reporting systems were transferred from Nexora to my new company, temporarily named Faro Consulting, though I was considering renaming it the Silent Builder, a name that would sting only those who once underestimated me. Franklin said nothing further. And me. I did not need to return, because I had never truly left. I had only moved positions, from being undervalued to being irreplaceable. After that, a wave of emails started flooding my company's inbox. Not all of the people who had believed in me. Many familiar names, directors who once could not remember my name during meetings, vice presidents whose assistants called me the logistics girl, were now asking to schedule a potential strategic conversation. I did not reply immediately. I began doing what Franklin once called a luxury, curating. The first client I rejected was a startup whose staff once referred to me as that logistics lady. I declined with a simple email. Thank you for your interest. My current schedule does not align with this engagement. They replied with a proposal offering double the fee. I still declined. Before, I worked to prove my value. Now I work because I know it. My company did not yet have a sign, did not have a glossy boardroom, but it had something Nexora no longer possessed: credibility. Vendors I had maintained honest, consistent relationships with began returning to me. Some even volunteered to shift their contracts to Faro Consulting. Working with you is easier, Carmen from North Axis wrote. You understand what a real deadline means. I began rebuilding the system from what I had once created, not for revenge, but to prove something. What I built was never for Nexora. It was because I could, and because I did it when no one else would. 1 month after the system went live again, Hexport sent a performance report. Delivery speed increased by 17%. Operational costs dropped 9%. Customer satisfaction reached its highest level in 5 years. I quietly took a screenshot and emailed it to myself. Subject line: I never disappeared. One afternoon, I walked past Nexora's old headquarters. The building looked the same, its glass panels catching the sunset like a startup still clinging to its golden phase. But inside me, there was nothing left unresolved. No anger, no regret. I had reclaimed what was mine, not the desk, not the title, but the recognition from the only person whose approval mattered: myself. I did not go back, but I had returned. No invitation needed, no title required, no permission asked. Because when you are the one who built the engine, you do not need to sit in the driver's seat to know the vehicle is headed the wrong way. If you are still listening, leave a comment. What would you do if your work were stolen? And if you have ever been in my position, tell me how you stood back up. I want to hear your story, and if you have never experienced this, then congratulations. But save this story. You will need it someday. I never imagined I would stand here, in the middle of a hall washed in warm lights, with the soft chime of glasses, polite laughter, and a quiet symphony playing in the background. But I also never imagined that after 3 silent years of work, the day I would be invited onto the red carpet of the logistics industry would feel almost natural. Tonight was the annual gala of the International Logistics Association, a gathering of major companies, investors, and strategic partners. Every year, the committee selects 3 individuals whose work has created significant innovation. When they called me, I thought it was a mistake. It was not. For the first time, someone remembered my name correctly. We would like to invite you as an honored guest. You represent a new generation, those who not only excel technically, but also understand the patience required to build from the shadows. I smiled, not because of the honor, but because someone finally understood that value does not need a title. I chose a simple white suit, no crystals, no dramatic cuts, nothing designed to impress. I did not need to stand out. I only needed to be myself. When I entered the hall, the host was speaking about the growth of the logistics sector over the past year: expansion, supply chain crises, artificial intelligence, and automation. And then, we would like to welcome someone special to the stage, someone who has not only stabilized operations across multiple systems, but has proven that value does not come from where you sit, but from the impact you create. I walked up. Lights hit my eyes, but I did not blink. I saw hundreds of people in the audience. Among them was Franklin. He sat outside the guest of honor section, holding a glass of wine, staring without blinking as I shook hands with the organizers. Even from a distance, I could read that look. No arrogance, not quite regret, something else. A look stripped of the right to judge. I spoke briefly on stage. No shouting, no cheap inspiration. 3 years ago, I believed that if I worked harder, did better, someone would eventually acknowledge me. Now I understand. Sometimes the issue is not your ability, it is where you choose to place it. I did not wait for an opportunity. I created one, and I know many people out there are doing the same every day. Applause filled the room. But what echoed louder was the quiet pat on the shoulder I gave myself. After the recognition, I was invited to the VIP area to sign a strategic partnership contract with Ironstream, once Nexora's largest client. They had stayed silent after I left. No notes, no farewells, nothing. And tonight, they signed again. With my company. Their representative, a sharp middle aged woman, said to me, "We are not signing because of the brand. We are signing because of the results, and only one person has ever delivered that for us: you." I signed. No shaking hands, no trembling heart. When I looked up, I saw Franklin standing a few steps away. Maybe he was getting a drink. Maybe it was a coincidence, but his eyes were fixed directly on my table. I knew he saw the moment. I knew he understood that once, long ago, he could have been the one representing that partnership. Now he was not. A member of Nexora's board, Richard, approached and stood beside him. They spoke quietly. I could not hear, but I knew he was speaking about me. Later, I learned exactly what Richard had said. "She is the only one who saved what was left from the chaos. As for you, Franklin, you burned everything with your ego." Franklin did not respond. Maybe he knew there was nothing left to defend. I did not look back. I did not smile at him. I did not shake his hand. Not because I was angry, because I was no longer part of that world. I had walked away from the game, but he was still trying to control. I was playing a different one, a game where I wrote the rules. I raised a glass with my team. 3 people: a young attorney who left a giant corporation to join me, an operations specialist fresh out of school who had been rejected from 5 companies for lack of experience. An administrative assistant was once dismissed as just a receptionist. Now they were the foundation of Faro Consulting. A media outlet approached for a brief interview. They asked, "If you could go back and tell something to Elena, something from 3 years ago, what would you say?" I answered without hesitation. "Do not wait for recognition. Everyone else is too busy trying to shine their own light." As the event wound down, a small group gathered near the cocktail area. I recognized several faces from Nexora, and yes, even Travis stood there. I did not know why he was invited, but I was not surprised. He saw me, took a step forward, then stopped. I looked at him and nodded gently. No resentment, nothing left to say. Everyone chooses their own path. As for me, I chose not to return to the old one. I chose not to be the foundation others stepped on. The gala ended as I walked out of the hall. The lights outside were softer than the stage lights, but far more comforting. I took a deep breath, the air of freedom. Not the physical kind, but the freedom from needing validation. I am Elena Monroe. I was once overlooked, once the fixer in the dark, once the one called just support. And now I am no longer in the shadows. If you have ever been underestimated, ever worked hard without being seen, ever stood on the sidelines because you lacked a title, then this story is for you. Remember this: your value does not come from the seat you occupy, but from the impact you leave behind, whether they write your name or not. If you want to hear more real stories from real people, people like you and me, who were once dismissed and chose to step into the light, subscribe to the channel. Because sometimes you do not need an invitation to step on stage. You simply step up when you finally know you belong there.